We skip space between each country. So these two where I made the lines would be the United States, where I'll just write US to make it simpler. Now US production, and again, I'm getting this right from the table. 9.1 is production in the United States. 18.8 is consumption. Again, consumption is what we make, or I'm sorry, what we use, where production is what we make. So something to think about. We make 9.1 million barrels per day of oil. We consume or use 18.8 million barrels per day. That's what we're going to draw with a bar graph. We're going to start with the production, and again it's 9.91, which is very close to 10, but not as close as Russia. Notice again, because this is the production, we're going to highlight it or shade it all in. We're pretty close. Again, I apologize for mine not being very perfect. For the consumption, it's 18.8, which is about 19. So it's around here. Again, we're going to make it as perfect as we can, but it's okay if it's not exact. And remember, because this one is doing the lines, we're not shading it in, we're just making lines. Alright, what do you think you're going to do next? If you said or thought to do another country, that's exactly what we're going to do. Remember, we're going to skip space again. We're going to put our two lines because we're doing two things for one country. We're going to write draw the oil production and oil consumption. And we're going to do Canada. So we're going to write CAN, easy for Canada. Okay? In Canada, looking back in our graph, in our table, Canada is 3.3 million barrels per day of production and 2.1 million barrels per day for consumption. So let's graph that. 3.3 for production. So I'm going to go to about here, close enough. Okay, that's my production. I'm going to remember highlight it. And then we're going to do consumption, which was 2.1. So it's pretty close to 2, just about here. And then remember, we're just going to make straight lines or diagonal lines to say consumption. You kind of see what we're getting here? We're making double bar graphs. Bar graphs, you have to skip space in bar graphs. But in this case, we're skipping space between each country. But when it's within each country, we're going to make them next to each other. So Russia has both production and consumption. They're right next to each other. US has both production and consumption. They're right next to each other. All right? And now we're basically going to do the same thing with the other two countries. I would recommend for you to pause this video so you could try this by yourself, because then you could press play again to double check your answers. I do want you to try this to make sure that you understand that you're graphing things correctly. Alright, the next one is Saudi Arabia. I'm going to just write S for Saudi and Arabia A. We'll put dots because they're two words. Okay? If you notice, the production is 9.7. It's again on your chart. So it's about here or so. Alright, we're gonna make sure we shade it all in. Again, yours is gonna look a lot better than mine. Okay. Then we're going to do the consumption of oil in Saudi Arabia, which is 2.4. And it's going to look something like this. Very similar to that. The next one is China. This is why I kind of made a little mistake in the beginning, because as you notice, if I were to go back and leave the way we did with the spacings, then I wouldn't have had enough room for China. So again, I apologize for that. For China, it says the production is 4, so we're going to go up to 4, which is the second vertical or horizontal line. We're going to shade that in or highlight it, whatever you want to call it. If you're using 2 colored pencils, you can absolutely do that, just as long as your key is exactly what you're drawing. And then China's consumption is 8.3. 8.3. So it's like around here. Okay. Make sure you're making the diagonal lines. You don't have to make diagonal lines. You can make something else, again, as long as you follow along with what your key is. And we are done. So we did the labels and we did the key. So we are done with our graph. When your graph looks like mine, you can turn to the next page and we're going to go through the questions. The first question asks, which country consumes the most oil? Remember, in our key, it tells us what did we write for consumption? This is the consumption. That means we're looking for the bars that have the diagonal lines. Which bar has the longest diagonal line? Well, I see it. It's right here. I'm going to highlight it yellow for you. Kind of makes it turn black. Kind of interesting. That's my bar. Well, if that's my bar, then what country am I talking about? You should have all said US. You should have all written it down already. Number 1 says, which country consumes the most oil? We do. We consume the most oil. We use 18.8 million barrels a day of oil. It's an interesting fact. All right. Now let's go to number 2. Which country consumes the least? What does it mean for it to be least? We're talking about the smallest. Yeah, which country consumes the least? Again, we're still talking about consumption, but we're talking about the bar that's the smallest. And on our graph, it looks like Canada. Saudi Arabia is very close by. If you look at our table of values, Saudi Arabia has 2.4 million barrels per day of consumption, where Canada has 2.1. So for number 2, the answer would be Canada. Number 3, which countries produce more oil than consume? So which countries means more than one. So we're looking to see which countries has higher production than the consumption. That means we're looking for where the production is higher than the consumption, such as Russia. What other countries can you think of? Looking at our data, we would also see that the production of it, that means they make more oil than they actually use. Russia is one. What are the other ones? You should have looked at the graph and saw that Canada also makes more than it uses, and so does Saudi Arabia. Good job. Number 4, which country consumes more oil than produces? So now we're looking at it the other way. Which countries use more than they produce? I think I forgot to put China over here. This is supposed to be China. Sorry about that. And if you notice, the other countries that consume more oil than they produce are the other ones that we haven't used yet. If we said that Russia, Canada, and Saudi Arabia produce more oil than consume in number 3, then number 4 would be the other two countries. Well, that makes sense. Check it out. Here's U.S. production. Here's how much they consume. They consume way more, or we consume way more than we produce. Look at China. Here's their production. Here's their consumption. They also produce way more, or I'm sorry, consume way more than they produce. And the last question is number 5. In the United States, what is the difference between consumption of oil and production of oil? Difference. Think about what operation would you use to answer that question. What does difference mean? I hope you thought of subtraction. So what you're going to do is go back to your table. Looking at United States, let me just, because we have a lot of colors on here, let me highlight it green. You're going to look at United States and you're going to take those two numbers and you're going to subtract them. What is 18.8 minus 9.1? That would be, for number 5, the difference between consumption of oil and production of oil. And the last question in 5 says, well, what does that mean? Well, if you haven't thought about it already, what it means is we use more oil than we make. That means that we have to spend a lot of money to buy oil from other countries like Saudi Arabia, like Russia, like Canada. All right, so what does that mean? When we run out of our oil, we're going to be dependent on other countries. Something to think about. Well, thank you so much for spending these 30 minutes with me and listening to my notes. I think you guys did a really good job following along. Remember to raise your hand and have Ms. Dixon come up and put a sticker in your packet that you're all done. Make sure that you have all the questions answered. If you did not understand the answers to some of the questions because I might have went too fast, make sure you rewind the video so you can listen through thoroughly again. When you're done with the packet, again, don't forget to ask Ms. Dixon for a sticker by raising your hand. Then put your packet as well as your bell work inside your blue folder, your energy folder, and ask Ms. Dixon for your homework. Thank you very much. I'll see you guys the next day.